Hello, this is Kat Garcia with Ground AI, co-CEO and co-founder, bringing to you Grounded Insights, a new series that features the most brilliant and innovative founders, as well as CEOs, C-suites, and operational leaders in the world of consumer today. Our next guest is Nancy Twine, the founder of Briogeo Haircare, a brand that is renowned for its clean, high-performance products designed for all hair types and textures. Now, you may know Nancy for having started her career as a vice president at Goldman Sachs. But to the world of beauty, she is known for having had a wonderful impact on the world of clean beauty after having Briogeo scale to becoming a multi-million dollar business that was acquired by Wella Company. Twine continued on as CEO, and since she has been working as an active investor as well as mentor. Let's go ahead and get started. Well, Nancy, thank you so much for joining us here on Grounded Insights. I'm so excited to have you. You are a legendary founder and someone who has pioneered hair care, but also the beauty space. And so I'm super excited to understand more of your learnings and more about your insights and what's keeping you excited these days. And so I want to just dive right in. You've built Briogeo and it started in your kitchen. It made its way into Sephora shelves all the way to an incredible acquisition. And so as you think about the maker's mindset and your entrepreneurial ventures today, what are some of those lessons from Briogeo that you're taking with you? And maybe what are some of those challenges that you wish you would have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the lessons that I'm bringing to Maker's Mindset, which is a new sort of platform that I've developed that's actually going to be evolving this month during the month of May. We have a new program that's going to be revealed next week, actually. But even though Maker's Mindset is a very different product than Briogeo, I think some of the lessons are certainly applicable, especially as it relates to, creating community centered products. It's one thing to have a great product, but it's another thing to have a great strategy for how you plan to build community around it. I think connectivity is so important, especially because we're living in a world in which so many categories have become increasingly competitive. And so having a great brand is important, having a great product is important, but also, the third piece of it is, having that sort of heart and soul to what it is you do. That's what builds the community piece. And so, building community around Maker's Mindset is a lot different, than it was for Briogeo, but sort of that focus, I think, is really key. And, it's really funny. I was just in a workshop with another founder and, the topic of people came up. And I think oftentimes the topic of culture and team gets overlooked when you're scaling a business. You're so focused on, all of the sort of front facing things that you sometimes have to learn the hard way how critical team is to setting up a successful venture. And I really do believe it starts at the top. It starts with the CEO. The CEO sets the culture and it trickles down. And so even as I'm building Maker's Mindset, we're still a very small team. I realize that, the way that I show up every day and interact with our freelancers, employees, community, really is setting the tone now for, what it is I hope this company embodies, both internally and externally. So the team piece is hugely critical.
When I think about a lot of founders that are maybe in the earlier stages, maybe they raised a pre-seed, a seed, even a series A, and they're building out that team. A lot of the time we're figuring it out, right? We're figuring out ourselves, and then also thinking about how do we want to show up. And so in the earlier stages of setting up that team and figuring out the roadblocks or the building blocks for that, what has helped you better understand and trust yourself as a leader?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it is really being open and receptive to feedback, which sometimes, getting feedback can be a scary thing because you don't know what to expect on the other end of it. But I also think that, creating a space where feedback is valued, you have to make sure that you're creating a safe space for it. Because if people don't feel like they're in a safe space to give feedback, they're not going to give you the real truth because they're fearful of what doing so could mean. And so I think it really, again, comes back to culture. I think, a culture of giving and receiving feedback has to be prioritized. But oftentimes, too, as founders and CEOs, you have to seek it out because 9 times out of 10, it's not going to come back proactively to you. It may be discussed amongst team members, but it's not necessarily something that's given to you unless you are actively seeking it and you're creating that safe space for people to actually give it. And so I think that that's a big part of it. And then I also think transparency and really making sure that you're bringing your team along on the journey is really important. Obviously, there are going to be times in which you do have to have closed doors meetings, but I think the majority of the time, your team should be aware of what are the goals, where are we at, what are the biggest hurdles that we have to tackle this year, what are some things that may have come up unexpectedly that have hindered our performance, where do the opportunities lie? Like if you were to go around your company and ask people that, they shouldn't be like, I have no idea, right? And so I think the more that you can really bring people into the fold and on that journey, the more that they're going to be bought into the mission and the goals of the company.
Absolutely. And I think that there is a balance that we're all trying to figure out in the early stages as well of seeking feedback, being transparent, but then also sort of establishing those boundaries as a leader, regardless of what you look like at the end of the day. There's good leadership practices and you can be firm, but then you can also be fair and if you need to apologize or if you need to be a little bit softer in order to welcome vulnerability and say, hey, I'm a human too, and maybe I didn't handle that conversation properly, or I could have done this better, that tends to lead to better results and a better culture and community,
Mm-hmm.
even internally. I guess finding that balance is something that could be quite difficult. I don't know throughout your journey if you ever felt like there were times where you had to navigate that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because I think the tricky thing is too, you want people to have trust in you as a leader. You are really sort of the pillar of the organization. And sometimes showing vulnerability can be a scary thing because you don't want people to think that you don't have it or that, perhaps you're lacking as a leader. Um, but I think, as I started to lean into my vulnerability more, I think it's the thing that created even more connectivity and trust with my team because they knew that I was going to be honest and they knew that, I wasn't going to try to, you know, sugarcoat things or pretend everything was okay when it wasn't. And so I think counterintuitively, again, there's this fear that being vulnerable is perceived as a weakness. But if anything, I think most people perceive it as a strength, and it's a really kind of the only way to build that trust with your team.
I love that. And I love the permission that you give yourself and to others and other founders that may be listening and watching to say, it's okay if you lean in, just see what happens. And
Right.
it seems like, you don't have to be vulnerable from like 0 to 1 right away. But if you
Hmm.
just start a little bit and see what happens, then you'll probably see a lot of good things start to shift.
Yeah, and again, I think it's also important too that, when you're interviewing people and building your team, that you're hiring for values. You want to bring in people that you feel like you can be vulnerable in front of, not people who you're scared to be vulnerable in front of because you think that, they're going to try to, slide in and create some justification for why you shouldn't be CEO or whatever. You want to hire people that you trust, and that trust is what's going to cultivate that ability to be vulnerable and it's sort of, self-fulfilling in that way. So I think at the end of the day, for that dynamic to work, it really does too start with hiring the right people who have aligned values.
Absolutely. When it comes to, you have a team and you have these growth goals that you need to hit, a lot of the time when it comes to building a brand or even a tech platform, what have those pillars been for you as markers of success for Briogeo or different projects that you've undertaken?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different, markers, but I think at the end of the day, it all has to start with the customer. We are in the business of, creating, at least for Briogeo, that the entity is in the business of, creating products that actually work and that customers love, and also creating a sense of community through accessibility by offering a range of products that cater to all hair textures and types, making people feel seen. And so we know when we're doing that through a lot of different ways, looking at product reviews. Are people happy with the products? Do they actually do what they say they do? How people are engaging with us across our platforms. There's so many different metrics, but I think, really for any company, if you prioritize those ones that start with the customer, because you can't focus on everything, but typically when you can really hone in and create success with the customer centric KPIs, that's going to sort of unravel, success for all of those different areas. But it really does start with the customer.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of it is understanding the customer, having a point of view, and then always going back to understanding how that customer is evolving over time. Because it's almost like you're creating culture, you're tapping into something that is ever changing while
Yeah,
also informing it. And so,
absolutely.
yeah, walk me through maybe some of the strategies or technologies that um, were really informative for you as you were kind of making those decisions and keeping track of a lot of the insights that you were gathering.
Yeah, so again, it's really sort of understanding what are all of your sources of data. We had a pretty big D2C business, so we were interacting directly with our customers who were, buying from Briogeo.com. So we were able to monitor what those tickets were and, use that insight to inform product changes, UX changes on our website. We do a lot of social listening. It's pretty amazing how much sort of real time feedback and input that you can get from your, community by simply, asking them through polls on Instagram stories or, creating, reels where you're just talking directly to your customers and asking them, what kind of products do you want to see next? And, should we create a tube version of the hair mask because some people don't like opening up jars in the shower? And they'll tell you. And then like I said as well, one of the really kind of cool things about the beauty industry is that people leave reviews for products. They will tell you what they like and what they don't like. And reviews have become such a dominant factor in how people, decide to purchase a product online. They compare reviews, so you can't ignore them. They're kind of in your face and can really sort of impact sales if they're not good. So I think the piece about understanding what your reviews are and then making sure that you have an action plan to fix them and also communicate to the customer what's being done so that they know it's happening is also, critically important. And then, for certain brands that have a brick and mortar retail presence, as Briogeo does at places like Sephora and Ulta, one of the cool things there is that you actually have store associates who are on the ground every single day, talking to consumers about your brand. What are they saying? If they're not picking up your product, whose product are they picking up and why? And so I think that's another really great source of data that can sort of help to inform brand and product decisions.
I love this take in terms of, needing to be open, because when you look at those reviews, it's that mirror and you can't really hide. And if you do, I mean, then you're not being vulnerable enough to say, well, I want to be able to improve, and I want to listen to what is actually going to improve the lives of other people, and therefore the product. And so it almost mirrors a lot of the way that you're looking to build teams, where there's a certain humility and power in that, because there's so much insights that you can get in order to grow.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
What's something that is currently keeping you super excited, that you're obsessed with, maybe professionally or personally?
Yeah, so what's really got me excited and something that I'm spending a ton of time on is this evolution of the Maker's Mindset platform, which actually started as a podcast where I was bringing on different female founders and executives that, would really story tell about their career paths and insights and lessons learned as a way to inspire the next generation of female founders and change makers. And um, over the years too, I've done so much mentoring, but the thing that I've struggled with is that I found it hard to actually scale my time. There are only so many people that I can mentor at once. And I started, finding myself having to say no more than I would like, just because I didn't have the time. And so I thought, wow, what if I could put together a comprehensive program that would dive into all the topics that founders are typically asking me about, whether that's fundraising, brand marketing, IP protection, supply chain, digital marketing. I mean, all the things. And I essentially did exactly that. And I created a 13 module deep dive accelerator. It's incredibly comprehensive. It's basically, my entire journey, lessons learned, insights. I also bring on guest experts within my network to really sort of, create accessibility for those people that may not have mentors or access to, the type of people that I've met, along my journey. And so this is a really exciting program that, I think is going to really help so many CPG founders who are either thinking about launching a business or who are actively scaling it. So that'll be launching on May 19th on makersmindset.com, and I'm just super excited for it.
I love it. I feel like this is the prelude of this. And I'm so excited because, you have so many incredible insights. My last question for you is, how do you stay grounded here on Grounded Insights?
Yeah, I mean, I stay grounded by just making sure that I'm carving out time on a weekly basis to really prioritize myself first. And really, the way that I do that is carving out time first thing in the morning before I send my first email, before I have my first call. I try to make sure that I'm doing something for me, whether that's, a workout or a meditation or just going for a walk. I have to make sure that I'm filling my cup up before I can give to everyone else. And again, I think part of the battle sometimes is just finding the time. And for me, at least with my schedule, I found that the morning times really work the best. And so that's how I stay grounded, is making sure that I'm carving out time for me every single day.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Nancy, for being here on Grounded Insights and for sharing all of those insights, and for, helping us as well as the community in terms of, how to grow a business, and learning from all of your success, and also all of the different pitfalls across your journey.
Thank you so much, Kat. This was so fun.